They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but sometimes it's best served at 5 a.m. with a fleet of tow trucks. Picture this. You wake up to the harsh, burning smell of fresh asphalt. Your private gravel driveway, one you spent $80,000 on specifically to stay free from HOA control, has been paved over in the dead of night, without permission. Your fence posts are knocked down like broken teeth. Your survey markers smashed into oblivion. And then the final insult letter. While demanding new monthly maintenance fees, the arrogance drips off the page as she smugly explains how your rustic road needed to meet proper standards. But here's what she didn't know. I'm a retired commercial developer. And the first hold a private towing contract with every impound lot in the S. County by sunrise. Every single car belonging to her little HOA clique had vanished like they'd never existed. Now let me ask you, what would you do if someone destroyed your property overnight? Where are you watching from right now? And what's the worst HOA nightmare you've ever seen? My name is Daniel Cross, and 3 years ago, I thought I had found paradise. After selling my construction company in Houston, my wife Maria and I bought our dream property, 3 acres of rolling hill country, right on the edge of a subdivision called Maplewood Estates. The house sat 400 yards back from the main road, connected by a gorgeous gravel driveway. Every time a car rolled over it, you'd hear that crisp crunch under the tires like breakfast cereal. Kept speed slow and gave the whole place a rustic charm. Here's the detail that saved me later. I bought that access road separately. It wasn't part of the subdivision. It wasn't under HOA rules. It was 100% private. The previous owner, Henry Lawson, is a clever old rancher who carved out that easement back in 1989, specifically to keep HOA politics off his land. I paid an extra $80,000 for that privilege, and it was worth every penny. Maria, my wife, she's a high school principal, practical, sharp, with a laugh that can diffuse any argument. Our daughter Emily was 15 at the time, focused on school and keeping clear of teenage drama. We'd moved here for peace, for privacy, for the kind of quiet family moments you simply can't buy in the city. Every evening, we'd sit out on the back porch, listening to mockingbirds, while the scent of Maria's jasmine plants drifted across. The yard, life was good, peaceful, until Victoria Holloway showed up. She was the human embodiment of a parking ticket. Imagine the most entitled real estate agent you've ever met. Multiply that by 10. Now, hand her a gavel and an HOA presidency. That was Victoria. She drove a white luxury SUV with vanity plates reading Prop QN, and yes, she thought that was clever. She'd ruled as HOA president for 3 years, during which she dragged a dozen neighbors into lawsuits over mailbox colors, fence styles, even bird feeders. This woman literally carried a ruler in her purse to measure grass height. No joke. Victoria specialized in what she called premium community management. Translation: she squeezed every dollar she could from homeowners while inflating property values for her real estate deals. She had this uncanny ability to turn her personal preferences into sacred covenants and frame her own ambitions as community emergencies. And then, one Tuesday morning in March, Victoria decided my private driveway was her next conquest. I was sipping my coffee when the thunder of heavy machinery shattered our peaceful morning. Outside my kitchen window, a crew was spreading hot asphalt over my carefully maintained gravel road. The acrid smell of tar and diesel burned my nose as I realized what was happening. The foreman, when confronted, showed me a work order signed by Victoria, Community Access Improvement Project, Maplewood. The survey markers I'd paid to have professionally installed were gone smashed to pieces, and where my private road met the subdivision entrance. They'd installed stone pillars with shiny brass plaques that read Maplewood Estates Grand Entrance, established 22-5. They weren't just paving my road, they were paving over my property rights. I stormed into the HOA office, a dingy little strip mall storefront down the road, my boots still dusty with gravel. Victoria sat behind her desk like a queen on a throne, surrounded by real estate awards and community service plaques. Her smile was sharp enough to cut glass, her perfume heavy like expensive gilt. We're simply bringing your rustic access up to community standards, she said, dragging out the word rustic like it was an infection. She slid a blown-up subdivision map across the desk. My driveway highlighted in yellow, labeled Future Community Thoroughfare. The previous owner verbally agreed to share this road someday, she added casually. No paperwork, of course, just her word against the memory of a dead rancher. The very next day, a certified letter arrived on HOA letterhead, $3,200 assessment fee, $1.85 monthly maintenance charges, the 30-day deadline to install community standard landscaping. The kicker? Threats of liens and legal action for non-dash compliance. Maria was furious. Emily's friends started treating the brand new asphalt like their personal parking lot and skateboard track. Every morning at 7 a.m., sound of wheels grinding outside our window reminded me of how badly this had spiraled. But here's what Victoria didn't know. Henry Lawson had included deed language that would make her legal team very, very sorry. They'd ever tangled with me, and that was only the beginning. They said my gravel road was dangerous, claiming it put school buses at risk, and that my resistance would drag down property values for the whole community. One evening, my wife Claire returned from grocery shopping looking shaken. She set the bags on the counter, her usual lavender shampoo smell replaced by the sharp scent of stress. They cornered me, she whispered, hands trembling as she unpacked. 3 neighbors. They made it sound like you're some kind of criminal. Linda Myers even asked if we were having money problems, if we planned to sell. While the HOA president, Victoria Hale, played politics, I was working on something bigger. I called my former business partner, Daniel Ruiz, now HOA traffic engineer, and ordered a GPS land survey. It cost $3,200, the exact amount Victoria had billed me for ruining my road. Within 3 days, he uncovered something shocking. Victoria had been quietly buying up nearby properties through shell companies for the past 18 months. That's when it clicked. She was after something called assemblage buying small parcels to create massive estate lots. My 3-acre property was the keystone in her multi-million-dollar plan. Without it, the whole scheme collapsed. The law was on my side. Argument for prescriptive easement that the road belonged to the community through long-term use was laughable. I had proof the road was private and locked every winter since 2021. The previous owner, Henry Lawson, had done the same since 1989. Victoria's case was weaker than a paper umbrella in a hurricane, but she wasn't backing off. By Friday, I received a certified letter from Henderson and Lowe attorneys. Ironically, they were the same firm that once represented me during my business sale. Now, they threatened a $50,000 lawsuit, claiming my survey stakes damaged community property. The irony burned. I was being sued for protecting what was mine, while she destroyed it without consequence. That weekend, Claire walked into the garage watching me sort through old files. She gave a half smile. You look like a general planning a campaign, she said. Funny you should say that, I replied, pulling out Lawson's original deed documents, because that's exactly what this is. Victoria shifted tactics to psychological warfare. She launched daily beautification walks. Groups of HOA loyalists marching past our home with phones out, snapping photos, pointing at our garden, whispering like neighborhood paparazzi. Even our daughter, Emily, started closing her curtains during the day. It's like living in a fishbowl, she muttered. She was right. Soon, the HOA's Facebook page filled with passive-aggressive posts, photos of our mailbox, captions like interesting landscaping choices, or does this meet fire safety codes? The comment sections turned into judgmental mob forums. Her masterstroke came at the county office. Somehow, my original survey documents vanished. A young clerk, sharing Victoria's last name, smiled as she said, "There's no record of your permits. You'll need to reapply. Filing fee, $2,800. Processing time, 6 to 8 months. Until then, your road access is uncertain." This wasn't bureaucracy. It was extortion, dressed in government paperwork. Meanwhile, Raymond's investigation confirmed my fears. Victoria's shell companies surrounded my land on 3 sides. She wasn't after community safety. She was building a property empire. I was the last holdout. Then the sabotage began. One Thursday morning, I smelled dying grass and wilted roses. Our irrigation system had collapsed during the Texas heat wave. I traced the problem and found the water line under the new asphalt had been deliberately cut. Before I could call a plumber, my phone rang. "Mr. Carter?" Victoria's voice oozed fake concern. "I hear you're planning to damage community. Infrastructure, you'll need board approval and a $5,000 deposit." The audacity was unbelievable. She broke my system and then demanded I pay her to fix it. Her attorneys escalated to filing for an injunction to remove my private property signs and survey stakes, accusing me of harassing HOA members. It was classic developer strategy: drown your opponent in legal costs until they surrender. But resistance was building. Marcus Dean, a retired Marine, installed security cameras around my property. Dr. Anna Ramirez, a local physician, shared her own horror stories about HOA harassment. Janet Collins, a teacher, revealed Victoria had tried to buy her corner lot for half its value, and she refused. Her trash pickup suddenly stopped every other week. A clear pattern emerged. Victoria wasn't just targeting me. She was bullying anyone who refused to sell. Then came the final straw, the tax bombshell. The county reassessed my property based on her improvements, hiking my taxes from $4,200 to $7,800. Appeals required paying up front. Another weapon, another squeeze. That evening, Claire and I sat on the porch, the sunset hidden behind a haze of dust and traffic. Skateboards rattled down what used to be our peaceful gravel drive. Claire glanced at me, eyes sharp. "She's desperate," she said quietly, watching another group of HOA supporters snap photos of our house. "Good," I replied, texting Raymond. "Desperate people make stupid mistakes." Well, I was ready. To catch hers, 12 HOA board members, an attorney, and a presentation folder thick enough to stop bullets. The county commissioner sat stiffly, looking more like hostages than officials, as Victoria Hale launched into a slick PowerPoint about community impact. Her proposal was as insulting as it was ridiculous. She wanted me to sell my private road easement to the HOA for $15,000, $15,000 for property worth at least $80,000. It wasn't an offer, it was legalized mugging. "This is generous," Victoria purred, sliding the folder across the table like it contained gold. "Considering the legal complications you've created," the stench of desperation clung to her words, no matter how much expensive perfume she wore. I stood, straightened my jacket, and delivered my counter. "I'll consider your offer, right after you consider mine. $0 and a public apology." Then I walked out, leaving her to explain to the commissioners why their time had been wasted on theater. The real war started the next week with a headline: "Property Dispute Divides Brookhaven Community." Victoria had clearly spent hours feeding the reporter her side of the story, painting herself as a noble leader, while branding me the selfish neighbor blocking progress. I got one lonely paragraph, buried between a bake sale announcement and a lost dog notice. The aerial photo was pure propaganda, my house drawn like an island of stubborn resistance, surrounded by the shining promise of development. Online, the comments section turned into a digital battlefield. Strangers debated my character, my finances, even Claire's choice of garden decorations. But while Victoria played media mogul, I was quietly building my counterattack. The trail cameras Marcus Dean had installed were paying off like Christmas morning. In just 3 weeks, we captured footage of Victoria's crew tearing out my survey markers at 2 a.m., dumping construction debris on my land. And my personal favorite, their security guard harassing Emily and her friends while they tried to check our mailbox still. Victoria wasn't done. My homeowner's insurance suddenly discovered new liability risks and demanded $4,000 more a year based on an anonymous complaint. This wasn't random harassment. I knew the playbook. It was a coordinated campaign, designed to break me financially until I caved. The intimidation spread to Claire's work. She came home pale after a casual chat with a school board member. Someone had filed an anonymous complaint, suggesting her husband's legal battles might reflect poorly on her as an educator. I'd seen this tactic before. If they can't break you directly, they target your family's livelihood. But here's the mistake Victoria made. Workplace intimidation tied to property disputes is a federal civil rights violation. She was accidentally building my lawsuit for me. Her so-called legal Hail Mary was a petition to the City Planning Commission to reclassify my road as a public thoroughfare. If successful, the city could seize it through eminent domain, maybe for a token dollar. The hearing was set for next month, giving her plenty of time to pack the room with angry neighbors, demanding I sacrifice my rights for their convenience. But my secret weapon was gathering strength. Dr. Anna Ramirez had been quietly digging into property law, finding precedents that shredded Victoria's case. Marcus was cataloging every harassment incident with military precision. Janet Collins started a social media campaign exposing Victoria's hidden property grabs, and Raymond Cole, my investigator, uncovered the smoking gun. Victoria's finances were crumbling. Her shell companies owed $340,000 to lenders. Her credit cards were maxed out at $67,000, and her real estate license was already under state investigation for shady conflicts of interest. She wasn't just playing a power game, she was fighting for her financial survival. Then came utility warfare. An anonymous complaint about my power lines triggered an $8,500 relocation demand. My internet failed mysteriously, requiring costly repairs under the new asphalt. That same week, Claire found a note tucked under her car windshield at school. "Oh, stop your husband before this gets worse." But her eyes betrayed the fear. "She's desperate," Claire whispered. "Good," I replied, snapping a photo for evidence. Desperate people make career-ending mistakes. And then finally the breakthrough. Raymond found it in the courthouse basement, inside a filing cabinet that hadn't been touched since the Reagan era. The musty smell of old paper clung to his clothes, but what he uncovered was priceless. Back in 1989, Henry Lawson, the original rancher, had played four-dimensional chess. The deed restrictions he filed were ironclad. Access road shall remain private property in perpetuity, subject to any HOA covenants, assessments, or interference whatsoever. In perpetuity, forever, until the stars burn out or Texas freezes solid. The document was notarized, triple-filed, and cross-referenced with the county surveyor. Lawson had written it as a shield against exactly this kind of HOA land grab. I almost wanted to build a shrine to that stubborn old cowboy, but Raymond wasn't finished. His corporate investigation revealed something devastating. Victoria's shell companies weren't just buying land, they were borrowing millions against projected HOA income. Her firm, Community Growth Partners, had taken out $2.4 million in loans, promising repayment through higher HOA fees from new members. The only way the math worked was if she rezoned the neighborhood as luxury estates, and my land was the keystone. Without it, the loans collapsed. Without rezoning, she defaulted. In 8 weeks, her first quarterly payments were due. Victoria Hale wasn't just harassing me for fun. She was cornered, drowning in debt, fighting for survival. And my refusal to sell was the one thread holding her entire empire together. 12 HOA board members, an attorney, and a presentation folder thick enough to stop bullets. The county commissioners sat stiffly, looking more like hostages than officials. As Victoria Hale launched into a slick PowerPoint about community impact, her proposal was as insulting as it was ridiculous. She wanted me to sell my private road easement to the HOA for $15,000, $15,000 for property worth at least $80,000. It wasn't an offer, it was legalized mugging. "This is generous," Victoria purred, sliding the folder across the table like it contained gold. "Considering the legal complications you've created," the stench of desperation clung to her words, no matter how much expensive perfume she wore. I stood, straightened my jacket, and delivered my counter. "I'll consider your offer, right after you consider mine. $0 and a public apology." Then I walked out, leaving her to explain to the commissioners why their time had been wasted on theater. The real war started the next week with a headline: "Property Dispute Divides Brookhaven Community." Victoria had clearly spent hours feeding the reporter her side of the story, painting herself as a noble leader, while branding me the selfish neighbor blocking progress. I got one lonely paragraph. It's buried between a bake sale announcement and a lost dog notice. The aerial photo was pure propaganda, my house, drawn like an island of stubborn resistance, surrounded by the shining promise of development. Online, the comment section turned into a digital battlefield. Strangers debated my character, my finances, even Claire's choice of garden decorations. But while Victoria played media mogul, I was quietly building my counterattack. The trail cameras Marcus Dean had installed were paying off like Christmas morning. In just 3 weeks, we captured footage of Victoria's crew tearing out my survey markers at 2 a.m., dumping construction debris on my land. And my personal favorite, their security guard harassing Emily and her friends while they tried to check our mailbox. Still, Victoria wasn't done. My homeowner's insurance suddenly discovered new liability risks and demanded $4,000 more a year based on an anonymous complaint. This wasn't random harassment. Knew the playbook. It was a coordinated campaign designed to break me financially until I caved. The intimidation spread to Claire's work. She came home pale after a casual chat with a school board member. Someone had filed an anonymous complaint suggesting her husband's legal battles might reflect poorly on her as an educator. I'd seen this tactic before. If they can't break you directly, they target your family's livelihood. But here's the mistake Victoria made. Workplace intimidation tied to property disputes is a federal civil rights violation. Building my lawsuit for me, her so-called legal Hail Mary, was a petition to the City Planning Commission to reclassify my road as a public thoroughfare. If successful, the city could seize it through eminent domain, maybe for a token dollar. The hearing was set for next month, giving her plenty of time to pack the room with angry neighbors demanding I sacrifice my rights for their convenience. But my secret weapon was gathering strength. Dr. Anna Ramirez had been quietly digging into property law, finding precedents that shredded Victoria's case. Marcus was cataloging every harassment incident with military precision. Janet Collins started a social media campaign exposing Victoria's hidden property grabs, and Raymond Cole, my investigator, uncovered the smoking gun. Victoria's finances were crumbling. Her shell companies owed $340,000 to lenders. Her credit cards were maxed out at $67,000, and her real estate license was already under state investigation for shady conflicts of interest. She wasn't just playing a power game, she was fighting for her financial survival. Then came utility warfare. An anonymous complaint about my power lines triggered an $8,500 relocation demand. My internet failed mysteriously, requiring costly repairs under the new asphalt. That same week, Claire found a note tucked under her car windshield at school. She handed it to me with steady hands. But her eyes betrayed the fear. She's desperate, Claire whispered. Good, I replied, snapping a photo for evidence. Desperate people make career-ending mistakes. And then finally the breakthrough. Raymond found it in the courthouse basement, inside a filing cabinet that hadn't been touched since the Reagan era. The musty smell of old paper clung to his clothes, but what he uncovered was priceless. Back in 1989, Henry Lawson, the original rancher, had played four-dimensional chess. The deed restrictions he filed were ironclad. Access road shall remain private property in perpetuity, subject to any HOA covenants, assessments, or interference whatsoever. In perpetuity, forever, until the stars burn out or Texas freezes solid. The document was notarized, triple-filed, and cross-referenced with the county surveyor. Lawson had written it as a shield against exactly this kind of HOA land grab. I almost wanted to build a shrine to that stubborn old cowboy, but Raymond wasn't finished. His corporate investigation revealed something devastating. Victoria's shell companies weren't just buying land, they were borrowing millions against projected HOA income. Her firm, Community Growth Partners, had taken out $2.4 million in loans, promising repayment through higher HOA fees from new members. The only way the math worked was if she rezoned the neighborhood as luxury estates, and my land was the keystone. Without it, loans collapsed. Without rezoning, she defaulted. In 8 weeks, her first quarterly payments were due. Victoria Hale wasn't just harassing me for fun. She was cornered. drowning in debt, fighting for survival, and my refusal to sell was the one thread holding her entire empire together. The corruption ran far deeper than small-town incompetence. County Commissioner Richard Collins wasn't just rubber-stamping Victoria Hales. Permitzi was her brother-in-law. His construction company had quietly pocketed $47,000 through no-bid HOA contracts for so-called emergency improvements, projects that just happened to require permits only he could approve. Derek, our investigator, uncovered 17 separate permits that violated standard procedures, all benefiting either Victoria's developments or Collins's company. Back in my contractor days, I'd seen shady politics, but this was textbook racketeering. The kind of scheme federal prosecutors dream about cracking, and it didn't stop there. The insurance fraud was almost artistic in its boldness. Victoria had systematically filed claims against 3 other holdout neighbors before me, pocketing $89,000 in settlements for supposed property damage and emotional distress. Insurance companies paid out quickly, choosing convenience over a fight, never realizing they were funding a professional intimidation campaign. Victoria had turned harassment into a business model, getting paid to bully her neighbors. Environmental records revealed even darker crimes. The road construction had illegally diverted protected wetland drainage without the required assessments. Under federal law that carried daily penalties of up to $37,500 and potential criminal charges for every forged permit, and whose signature was stamped on the environmental waivers. Commissioner Collins. In my construction years, I'd heard prosecutors talk about RICO, enterprises, organized criminal operations built on fraud, intimidation, and financial manipulation. Victoria's entire property scheme fit that definition like a glove, with consequences that could mean triple damages and 20-year prison sentences. That night, my wife Claire found me in the kitchen, surrounded by Derek's files. I must have been grinning like a man who'd just struck oil. "You look different," she said, settling beside me with her coffee. "I feel different," I told her. For the first time since this nightmare began, I wasn't just defending myself, I was on the attack. The balance of power had shifted. Victoria needed me more than I needed her. She just didn't realize it yet. Knowledge is power. But organized knowledge, that's a weapon. That weekend, our garage became what Claire jokingly called the war room. Maps plastered the walls. Legal documents hung from clotheslines like evidence in a crime drama. Timelines stretched across tables like battle plans for D-Day. Marcus brought his military precision, laying out surveillance operations with enough gear to make the Pentagon jealous. Dr. Alvarez contributed legal research sharp enough to put professors to shame, along with medical documentation of stress-related symptoms caused by Victoria's harassment. Janet arrived with her teacher's organizational superpowers, color-coded folders, labeled binders, everything filed and cross-referenced. "This looks like either a boring movie set or the world's strangest garage sale," Claire joked. Sipping her coffee as she surveyed the scene, my first real strike was calling Catherine Steele, the most feared property rights attorney in Dallas. With a 94% win rate, she had a reputation for making opposing counsel cry in depositions. Her strategy was ruthless in its simplicity. A quiet title action and a federal environmental complaint filed the exact same day as the HOA's public hearing. "They won't know what hit them," Catherine said. "By the time they react, they'll be scrambling to defend criminal charges instead of attacking your land." For 3 days, we compiled evidence. Derek assembled 847 photographs, 23 hours of video, and 156 documents proving systematic harassment and property interference. The timeline of escalating crimes was enough to make federal prosecutors salivate. Most people don't realize what SLAPP suits really are: strategic lawsuits designed not to win, but to intimidate opponents with endless legal costs. But Texas has strong anti-SLAP laws. Victoria's campaign checked every box, which meant when the dust settled, she'd be paying my attorney fees. Catherine's financial counterstrike was genius. We filed an insurance claim against the HOA's liability policy, triggering an investigation that could void their coverage entirely. If fraud was found, board members would be personally responsible for damages. Meanwhile, Janet helped Claire launch a Facebook group called Willow Creek Property Rights Alliance. In 2 days, membership swelled to 127 residents, all sharing horror stories of HOA bullying. Dr. Alvarez posted sharp, evidence-filled essays about HOA abuse that hit harder than sledgehammers. Marcus explained HOA tactics through the lens of military strategy, exposing their failures to follow even basic principles of fairness. Our secret weapon came in the form of Jake Morrison, tow company owner who dealt with HOA contracts. For decades, when I explained the situation, he grinned. "That woman owes me 12 grand in unpaid towing bills," he said, slapping down a thick folder of invoices. "Been chasing her for months. You know what that means?" I did mechanics. "Liens take priority over most debts." Jake's unpaid bills gave us a direct legal claim against HOA. Property, another loose thread that could unravel Victoria's entire empire. Soon, our intelligence network spread like a spider web. Neighbors volunteered as scouts, monitoring HOA meetings, permits, and construction sites. Marcus set up encrypted communications, while Dr. Alvarez quietly recruited allies on the school board and planning commission, people sick of Victoria's strong-arm tactics, environmental specialists, confirmed EPA violations serious enough to spark federal investigations. And local journalist Sarah Lawson, an award-winning corruption reporter, agreed to run a feature exposing Victoria's empire right after our filings went public. Dr. Alvarez even built a psychological profile. Victoria displayed every sign of a narcissistic spiral escalating aggression the moment her authority was questioned. His warning was chilling. She likely lash out before accepting defeat. You need to be ready for property damage. Maybe even confrontation. Our trap was simple but brilliant. We filed paperwork but held off on serving notice, lulling Victoria into thinking I was retreating. In reality, we wanted her to overplay her hand, and she did. That Tuesday night, I woke to the sound of unmarked trucks outside. Floodlights illuminated workers laying down speed bumps and residents-only signs at 2 a.m. The stench of asphalt and diesel choked the air, and there she was, Victoria, her self-directing traffic in a pink tracksuit, barking orders like a reality TV villain in meltdown mode. But the moment that chilled me came 2 days later. Claire was loading groceries when Victoria approached her in the school parking lot, smiling like a predator closing in on prey. "Claire, honey," she purred. "I know this has been stressful. I'll make this simple. $25,000 cash if your husband drops this ridiculous lawsuit." Thankfully, Claire had the presence of mind to hit record on her phone. What she captured was priceless Victoria Hale openly admitting the money came from the Community Improvement Fund, which Derek had already proven was siphoned from HOA dues. She was literally trying to bribe us with stolen money while confessing to crimes on camera. "Think about your daughter's future," Victoria coaxed, clearly unaware she was being recorded. "This legal mess could drag on for years and cost you everything." Claire's response deserved a standing ovation. "The only thing costing us everything is dealing with criminals who treat private property like their personal piggy bank." Meanwhile, Derek's digging into Commissioner Collins was paying off. The inspector who'd approved Victoria's permits had never even visited the construction sites. Approvals were rubber-stamped through backdated emails. When Derek's evidence hit the state attorney general's office, they opened a full investigation that promised to make Collins' life very complicated. The harassment soon escalated into psychological warfare that would have impressed Cold War operatives. Anonymous flyers appeared on windshields, accusing me of running an illegal business from home. False complaints poured into the fire marshal's office about hazardous storage. Apparently, my workshop tools counted as industrial equipment in Victoria's twisted imagination. Someone even filed bogus reports with Child Protective Services, forcing Claire to endure a humiliating inspection that, of course, thought nothing. Then came the attacks on our daughter. College applications delayed by verification errors that somehow only affected our address. She held on to straight A's while dealing with harassment that would have broken most adults. My pride in her resilience only fueled my anger further. That Friday night, things got violent. I woke to find our mailbox smashed, though Marcus cameras caught 2 HOA board members swinging the bat. My landscaping was poisoned with herbicide, leaving dead patches in the shape of words, "Move." Hoses were cut, flooding our basement with muddy water. And then the bright orange paint splashed across our siding, visible from the subdivision entrance, like a scarlet letter branding us as outcasts. From my years in construction, I knew vandalism usually meant desperation. Victoria was running. Out of time, the community itself was fracturing. At the next HOA meeting, chaos erupted. Dr. Alvarez demanded financial transparency. Marcus openly challenged their authority to fine people for made-up violations. Janet's questions about Shell company expenses left the treasurer stammering excuses. 3 more families quit the HOA altogether, fed up with the corruption and harassment. On social media, things turned vicious. Fake accounts smeared our family with lies. Claire got messages threatening her job and our safety. Our daughter was bullied at school by kids parroting their parents' poison, but beneath the chaos, something important shifted. Law enforcement was finally paying attention. A sheriff's deputy who'd witnessed the mailbox destruction filed an official report and ordered extra patrols. He even recognized some HOA members from past domestic violence calls, which explained their comfort with intimidation. One evening, as another patrol car crawled past our home, Claire joined me on the porch, her hand slipping into mine. "She's going to try something bigger?" she whispered. I nodded. Good, let her dig the hole deeper. And dig she did. Victoria announced community action day, a wholesome-sounding beautification project. Barbecue, lemonade, neighbors working together. But the real plan? A mob of 20-plus residents armed with sledgehammers and bolt cutters, ready to rip out every survey marker, camera, and private property sign on my land. That Saturday morning, the air shook with the rumble of trucks unloading chainsaws and tools. It looked less like a neighborhood gathering and more like a militia. Victoria emerged from her luxury SUV in a pink tracksuit, clipboard in one hand, bolt cutters in the other, leading her crew like a general. They even wore matching shirts, Willow Creek pride. She had turned trespassing into a team-building exercise. "Morning, neighbors," she called, her voice dripping with fake cheer. "Ready to bring this community up to proper standards?" The crowd cheered, like they were at a pep rally instead of preparing to commit a felony. That's when I walked out. Camera in hand, joined by Deputy Rodriguez, a nonsense veteran Marcus had quietly summoned. "Folks," he said firmly, "step back. This is private land. You're trespassing." Victoria turned it into theater, screaming about harassment and property values while waving the bolt cutters like a weapon. When she stepped onto my property, Rodriguez had seen enough. The metallic snap of handcuffs silenced the mob. 2 of her loudest supporters joined her in citations for trespassing. Her plan to control the story backfired spectacularly. She'd invited a local news crew expecting sympathy. Instead, they filmed her arrest, live screaming about protecting the community while handcuffed and holding bolt cutters. Reporter Sarah Lawson didn't miss the real story. She pressed Victoria on environmental violations and shady finances. The footage captured her ranting, admitting to forcing property sales and bringing neighbors into compliance. Federal prosecutors couldn't have asked for better evidence. Victoria spent the next 72 hours in county jail. Her bond was set at $50,000, but her frozen accounts meant she couldn't pay. Her mugshot hit the evening news alongside Sarah's expose on HOA corruption. The woman who had terrorized her neighbors for years was finally getting the spotlight she always craved. Her financial empire collapsed like dominoes. Banks froze her shell company accounts. Properties tied to her partnerships slipped into foreclosure. The HOA's insurer canceled their policy under the criminal activity clause. Leaving board members personally liable, Janet uncovered the final nail in the coffin. Victoria had embezzled $127,000 from community funds to cover her failing investments. The audits had been signed off by her brother-in-law's accounting firm, which explained how the theft stayed hidden for years. 15 families demanded an emergency election. By unanimous voice, Dr. Alvarez became the new HOA president, with Marcus and Janet handling financial oversight. Their first act was to issue formal apologies to harassment victims and pass strict transparency rules. And just like that, the tide turned. The FBI's Financial Crimes Unit picked up the case after EPA referrals. A grand jury subpoenaed 3 years of HOA records, bank statements, and all communications between Victoria and Commissioner Collins. The net was finally closing. That evening, I stood in our newly restored backyard, watching the sunset spill, orange and purple across the sky. The roar of traffic was gone, replaced by birdsong and the laughter of children playing safely nearby. Claire squeezed my hand, her wedding ring flashing in the fading light. "It's really over, isn't it?" she asked softly. "Almost," I answered, thinking of Jake Turner's towing trucks quietly stationed around the neighborhood, one last safeguard against anyone clinging to Veronica Hale's crumbling empire. The federal courthouse in downtown Dallas was overflowing like a stadium before a championship game. Veronica Hale's sentencing had drawn over 200 neighbors, reporters, and prosecutors who had spent months building their case from the evidence I'd collected. Nervous whispers echoed off marble walls as cameras clicked in rapid bursts. Inside the courtroom, Judge Patricia Collins entered with the gravity of someone about to hand down justice on organized crime. I sat in the front row with Claire and our daughter Isabella, surrounded by friends who had become family through this ordeal. Marcus wore his dress uniform. Dr. Alvarez held testimony on medical harm caused by stress. And Janet had rallied a dozen families who suffered under Veronica's reign of intimidation. The prosecutors had presented 847 pieces of evidence: photos, videos, financial records, everything Derek and I had documented. Veronica's court-appointed lawyer looked like he wanted to vanish. The victim impact statements began. Claire described the workplace intimidation and the threats that shook our family. Her voice never wavered as she explained how Veronica had weaponized her career and terrorized our teenage daughter. The air in that courtroom grew heavy. Dr. Alvarez spoke about residents needing medical treatment for stress. Marcus explained how Veronica's tactics violated even the basic principles of conflict resolution. 12 more families told stories of financial extortion, vandalism, and fear. The pattern was undeniable. This wasn't petty harassment. Veronica had been running a criminal enterprise. It's designed to scare homeowners into selling at rock-bottom prices. When it was Veronica's turn, her lawyer pled for leniency, claiming desperation. But she couldn't stay silent. She launched into a bizarre rant about protecting property values and community standards, sounding more like a broken real estate commercial than someone facing federal prison. Watching her ramble about neighborhood rules while on trial for fraud and racketeering was surreal. Then came the evidence. Catherine Reed's timeline showed everything: harassment, escalating into property destruction, then into environmental crimes. Courtroom screens played footage of vandalism, intimidation, and midnight construction. Financial audits revealed $340,000 embezzled. Environmental experts testified about lasting ecological damage from her illegal wetland projects. The prosecution had built a bulletproof case. Judge Collins announced criminal forfeiture. Every property Veronica had bought with stolen money, including her house and her repossessed SUV, would be seized. Those funds would compensate victims and restore the environment. When the judge delivered the sentence, 8 years in federal prison, the courtroom erupted in applause that echoed like thunder. Veronica's face went pale as reality sank in. Commissioner Hayes had already been sentenced to 5 years, and several city officials had pled guilty to lesser charges. The media swarmed. Sarah Lawson's live broadcast reached 2.3 million viewers, showing how one homeowner's documentation exposed corruption and environmental crime. National outlets picked it up as an example of HOA abuse overturned by ordinary citizens. The victories piled up. Federal court ordered $2.1 million for wetland restoration funded by the forfeiture. My property became the northern edge of a new protected wildlife corridor. The EPA announced our case would serve as a model for prosecuting future environmental corruption. The precedent was just as powerful. Rockwell v. Willow Creek HOA would be studied in law schools nationwide. The Texas legislature introduced the Property Owner Protection Act inspired by our case. Judge Collins Closing remarks silenced the courtroom. This case shows the danger of unchecked authority and harassment. Mr. Rockwell's patience and documentation saved this community. Let this serve as a warning. Property rights are not negotiable in America. The financial reckoning was swift. Civil courts awarded me $480,000 in damages and attorney fees. RICO treble damages multiplied every proven act of harassment. The OS insurer was forced to cover environmental restoration. As federal marshals led Veronica away in cuffs, she still shouted about protecting property values, pointing at me like a child caught stealing cookies. Outside, Claire and I stood in the sunshine, surrounded by friends who had walked with us through hell. "Ready to go home?" she asked, squeezing my hand. "More than ready," I replied. "Let's celebrate freedom." Justice felt even sweeter when shared. That's why I donated $200,000 of the settlement to create the Willow Creek Veterans Scholarship Fund for military families. Claire joined the board alongside Dr. Alvarez and Marcus, transforming our alliance into a force for good. The first scholarship went to the son of a neighbor who had supported us from the beginning. Watching that young man accept his award while his veteran father wiped away tears reminded me why this fight had mattered. The environmental restoration was finished in record time. Miller's Creek, once destroyed, now flourished with wildlife. Not seen in decades, brightly colored buntings sang each morning where construction noise once roared. My gravel road was repurposed as a nature trail connecting our subdivision to the new preserve. Educational signs, funded by Veronica's forfeited money, taught families about property rights and conservation. The irony was delicious. Isabella earned a full scholarship to the University of Texas with her essay about standing up to bullies and protecting what's right. She chose environmental engineering, inspired by watching the restoration unfold. Claire earned a district-wide promotion for her leadership during the crisis. Our long-postponed family trip to Alaska was finally realized, funded by documentary rights. Watching grizzly bears catch salmon while Isabella planned her classes felt like the perfect reward after years of struggle. Claire's laughter across the wilderness was the sweetest sound I'd heard in years. Even the numbers told the story. Our home's value rose 45% after the corruption was exposed and the land restored. Neighboring properties surged too, thanks to the wildlife preserve. What had once been a battlefield of intimidation was now a sanctuary of growth, justice, and hope. The neighborhood was reborn as the Willow Creek Conservation Community in name. That finally meant something more than a real estate slogan. The legal reforms sparked by our case became the Texas Property Owner Protection Act, passed with rare bipartisan support. The new law requires HOAs to carry $2 million in liability coverage for board misconduct, created a state ombudsman for property rights disputes, and made targeted harassment of homeowners a criminal offense. Ironically, Veronica Hale's destructive legacy laid the foundation to protect countless families in the future. Jake Turner's towing company exploded after the case. It's growing nearly 300%. His new specialty? HOA accountability services that make shady boards very uncomfortable. Sarah Lawson's Emmy-winning documentary Neighborhood Nightmare reached over 15 million households, inspiring property rights legislation in a dozen states. Our own community transformed completely. Dr. Alvarez was elected HOA president with 89% of the vote, running the most transparent governance we'd ever seen. Budgets are posted online every month, and annual dues dropped from $2,400 to just $400. After ending kickbacks and shady contracts. Meanwhile, Marcus and Derek launched a private investigation firm that has already helped 37 families fight HOA abuse across Texas. 3 families who nearly lost their homes under Veronica's foreclosure schemes used restitution funds to save their properties. Even her old house has been repurposed. The community center now hosts conflict resolution training, turning a symbol of corruption into a place of healing. Our Freedom Road Festival has become a tradition. At the 3rd annual gathering last month, more than 500 people came from across the state to celebrate the power of standing up to bullies. The smell of barbecue filled the air, kids bounced in inflatable castles, and families laughed together. On the very spot where Veronica's guards once intimidated visitors, today, Claire and I are considering semi-retirement, maybe consulting for families facing similar HOA battles. Derek is already knee-deep in 3 new corruption cases, and we laugh about taking our story on the road as a kind of property rights education tour. The sound of children's laughter. On our restored gravel road, blending with birdsong from the protected wetlands is exactly what we dreamed of when we first bought our little slice of freedom. Do you have your own HOA nightmare story? Share it in the comments. You'll never know who might need to hear they're not alone in this fight. And don't forget to subscribe to HOA Stories for more real-life David versus Goliath victories next week. I'll tell you about Margaret Collins, a 72-year-old grandmother in Oregon, who used an old property law called adverse possession to reclaim land from her corrupt city council. Because sometimes the best revenge really is living well, while keeping careful records. Stay patient, stay persistent, and remember, petty tyrants always fall, especially when you document everything. Your HOA dues aren't their personal piggy bank. Renewable energy installations are legally protected in most states. Drop your worst HOA horror story in the comments, and make sure you're subscribed for more tales of neighborhood justice and community comebacks.